So one idea is that, well, people, it's an illusion, it's hallucination. These visions of prescience, of seeing ahead, and in reversing time and all this stuff, that it's just one of the delusions that start in the temporal lobe. But it's also the people who study this say, well, no, this is where you start to realize that you're actually having an ESP experience. So it was extremely controversial. And what's so funny about it, if you talk about this stuff to scientists one-on-one, they'll say, oh yeah, I believe it, but nobody ever would admit that they think it's true, because it's such a violation of what they think is a violation of the laws of physics, and that you can reverse time. That is, I can see ahead of time, right? I know what's going to happen in 5 to 10 seconds or a minute. Well, this seems quite ridiculous because it violates every commonsensical thing we know about time, and we feel that it violates the physics of time. But in fact, if you look at almost all of the physics equations, the time is never an arrow in either direction. So even in the physics, it's not a hard-boiled thing at all. But still, it's hard to believe that time could be reversed. I mean, who can believe that? I can give you an example of something that's curious, so that nobody can't explain. Now, back in the 80s, we had not had earthquakes here in Southern California for many years. And I was sitting with my son, and we were sitting downstairs at like 7:30 at night. We're talking about sports, right? He was like 13, 14, and we're sitting there talking about sports, and all of a sudden everything stopped, and I said, we're going to have like a very large, 6.8 earthquake tomorrow morning at 7:30 in the morning. And he went, what? And I don't know. It was like somebody was talking out of my head. No reason, no point. And he goes, why did you say that? And I said, I don't know. It just, it just seemed like it. And at 7:30 the next morning, we had the biggest earthquake. It started rumbling. My son came downstairs pointing. He was crying and laughing at the same time, pointing at me like it was like a spook or something. And that happened 10 times over the next 4 years, late 80s and early 90s, to the point. But I would tell people beforehand, when I got this sense that something was coming, that an earthquake, it was always very specific. It always occurred about 10 hours before the earthquake. And I could tell, I have some idea of the magnitude. It was very bizarre. And it got to the point where I wasn't missing. So I started smoking toward the end of this, and that killed it. So I went like 12 for 13. The 13th one I started smoking. It's a good way to kill it. This sensibility, as it turns out, nicotine turned out to be very useful.
Yeah, it's a big carcinogenic.
And people, my friends knew about it because they'd call up, and they said, whenever it happens, call up beforehand. So that occurred, and we've never figured out what it is, but it could be that where I live, where our house is, it's very close to the sandstone, closer than anybody else, and we don't feel earthquakes so much here because we're right on the sandstone. Our house. I'm talking about our house, not our neighborhood, just this house. Yeah. And so it could be that I'm smelling radon or smelling early vibrations before other people can feel them. And it's been going on since I was about 13, this stuff. And it comes in torrents and waves. And I'll go through maybe 3 or 4 or even 5 of these 5 to 8 day things a year. But they're not locked into any rhythm, circadian rhythm or season. They just seem to happen, out of nowhere and without any particular rhythm. But the first flurry of these things really started when I was, like I said, about 13. I was with my friend, and he had all these gadgets at the house. The father was a doctor, and he had, this was back in what, 19, Jesus, like 66, 61, right? This is 60. And I'm over at his house. This is upstate New York. We lived in Loudonville, New York. And my bud and he had just gotten a tape recorder, a reel-to-reel, and we're just joking around like boys do, making fart noises with our arms. And then in the middle of it, I said, Ned, interview me right now. He said, why? He said, I just interviewed me. He says, okay, where are you? I said, well, I'm heaven, and I'm here. And Ned asked the microphone. So what happened? I said, well, I was driving along up in Route 9N, up in the Adirondacks, right near Lake Placid. And as I was driving, I was in my XKE. And as I went around the turn, a tree jumped out into the middle of the road. And I hit it and I died. And I'm in heaven reporting back. And he's going, and I remember his face. This was a long time ago, but he was, and he's going, what are you talking about? Well, it turned out, his father had a friend. They had all these gadgets, but the father's friend was showed up and had a black XKE. I saw the XKE, and this whole story popped out at that minute when I saw the XKE. So it wasn't quite de novo, but it was an XKE, and I'd never seen one. And that was the car I said that this guy, his friend, died in. Well, a week later, I got a call from my friend. He says, I can't play with you anymore. I said, what happened? What's the matter? He said, well, my father's friend was up on Route 9N, right where you had said. He heard the tape recording, and it was up near Lake Placid, and he went around a bend and hit a tree head on and died. So that was, his father didn't want me to hang around him anymore. It was just too freaky, right?
Wow.
Well, this is, so there were hundreds of these types of experiments. So experiences, not experiments. And I learned not to talk about them. So I've never talked about these publicly either. You're the only one I've ever, this right here. So I've never really talked about them because, if you're one of my colleagues and say, what is he saying? He's saying he has ESP experiences as well. I have odd experiences. And so you're always trying to protect your colleagues, right? Because they don't want to think maybe he's nuts or something. But you hit a certain age, it's like, why don't you tell everything as you know it? And so it's very disconcerting. I don't particularly like it. It may seem like it's fun, and it's not. I don't like it. And because then you're always wondering, you have a feeling of ominous feeling coming. Then it's very disconcerting. So I don't particularly like it. It sounds like it would be fun, right? And some people think it's fun, but when things like that happen, and it will freak people out. But my family knows about it. My wife knows about it, and a bunch of my friends know about it. And I'll tell them beforehand, and they rather think it's fun, right? Other than that first time with my son, who just freaked out, he couldn't believe it. And but there are other sorts of things. Like a typical thing is I'll go into somebody's office or house and I'll feel very uncomfortable. And they'll say, what's wrong? I said, something really bad happened in this seat right here. And they'll freak out because somebody will have been killed there. Because they'll have this sense of this flux, this what's called Schlieren. Do you ever see like dissimilar fluids, like water and oil, and they get the shimmering thing? Well, I'll see these rushes going very fast coming out of a spot in the ground. And I'm very close each time that something terrible happened, a murder or something. I mean, at one time it happened to a guy that I'd met, and he absolutely flipped out. He brought a priest over and an exorcist to get rid of this out of his body. You gotta be kidding, man. And I said, but he goes
smoking sage and
well, I wasn't there. He told me, and I came over when the priest, the sexton, was leaving, and he was serious. He's freaked out completely. And now I think some of this stuff it sounds quite not believable, and I think there's a trivial answer to it. I think there is the following, for example. One thing is that I think some people are very aware of their surroundings at all times and all their thoughts. They probably have 50,000 perceptions of these mini perceptions a day. And if you remember your dreams, like I remember my dreams, I have lucid dreams all the time. I remember, and they're wonderful. And I have a tendency to really pay attention. I had OCD growing up. It really helped with this because I look at every detail. And I can remember. My memory has been thoroughly tested many times. I got very good memory, and I work on memory. I've done a bunch of papers on memory too, so I study it. So I kind of know a bit about it, and so I think some people who are very aware of their thoughts and their feelings all the time, And I think another help is I grew up starting when I was a year and a half old with asthma. So and I still have asthma. So as a child, I was always very aware of every breath, every breath, every breath. So well, the breath and the thoughts, these would go on internally. When I had asthma attacks, it seemed like they go on for years, but I was very aware of my body, very aware of my thoughts and all these little feelings and what was pumping through my veins. And this, I think, gave I don't know if it's an advantage, but gave the ability to hold from day to day many perceptions in short-term memory. Well, if you have 50,000 things that go through your mind and you can remember them, the chances are that something is going to match up. And so it's going to seem like ESP if you can remember it all. If you're somebody who's not aware, this never would happen. They would never match up. So if I have the perception of the Pope is going to be assassinated this afternoon, if I have that perception, but I have 50,000 of these things, the chances are one of them is going to hit. So it's going to seem like perfect ESP.
But
So
how do you predict that? You've got 50,000. How do you predict that one is going to be?
if you're aware of all these, if you're quite tuned into your thoughts, and you have short and intermediate term memory, then I think the chances are that something is going to line up. So I think it's a matter of attention, and short-term memory gives you what apparently looks like ESP. And if everybody was able to, everybody paid attention, they would have it. I think it's something trivial like that.
Okay, but how does that explain the experience when you were younger with
It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't at all. It doesn't, because I was completely agnostic